Hi, this is Mike Halloran, and this is a presentation for parents who have a son or daughter in one of my backpacking classes this fall. The dates for this trip are Saturday, October 14th through Monday, October 16th. We're heading to the North Shore of Minnesota, and we'll be spending our nights at Temperance State Park. We have a couple reasons we do this trip. We want to provide an opportunity for kids to practice the skills they learned in class. We want to introduce them to the Superior Hiking Trail and some real scenic state parks up in the northern part of our state. This trip is optional, not required for credit, so kids that are not able to go on this trip are not penalized at all. We have just an assignment that they do back at school on the day that we'll be missing, which will be Monday. The kids who go on this trip will be excused for that day, and it'll be for the entire day of school. Our itinerary for Saturday, we leave pretty early, around 6 a.m., load everything up on a trailer behind one of the school buses. Try to leave around 6:30, stop on the way near Duluth for a bathroom break, and arrive at our entry point on the Superior Hiking Trail around 11:30. We'll need to take the bus back to Temperance. And then once I return, the kids and I will take our hike and the rest of the chaperones. So we'll start hiking around noon, arrive around 1 o'clock or so at Carlton Peak, which will be about a mile and a half, and take a little break, enjoy the scenery. Then we'll take off again and head down to Temperance, kind of stop along the way and look at some real scenic areas as well. Once we get to Temperance, kids will set up their campsites, and we've got campsites reserved for our whole group. So they'll cook dinner with their group, relax around the fire, and get them into bed around 11 o'clock. Superior Hiking Trail goes from Duluth, and it goes all the way up to the Canadian border, so the area we'll be spending our time at will be right here at Temperance. And then day one will be just a hike from right around here, just north of Tofty, down to Temperance. Day two will be going all the way up to the Canadian border and hiking into some waterfalls at some of the parks along the way. So this is a little closer view. This is Temperance right here. Tofty is right there. We kind of head right up to on the Sawbill Trail to our entry point and hike about 5 miles. A little closer view here. Here's a Sawbill Trail. Drive up here to this area, this entry point, and hike this whole area right here, which again is around 5 miles, probably down to the campground we'll be staying at. There's fair elevation change on this hike. It's not super steep on the way up to Carlton, but you can see the difference. We go from 1,100 to 1,500 feet. It's a fairly easy walk. And then once we get there, the rest of it's kind of all downhill. Nothing too treacherous as it looks like on this diagram, but there's a fair elevation change. We get down to somewhere around 650 feet when we get to the campground. Here's our entry point sign, about a mile and a half to Carlton Peak, and then Temperance State Park is probably going to be around close to 4.8 to 5 miles. These are some views from Carlton Peak. We're looking south. You can see Lake Superior, and you got some great shots of the Superior National Forest. This is me with one of my students last year. Kids really enjoyed that. Last year was the first year we took this particular trip, and it was a big success. The kids had a lot of really favorite moments on this trip, like checking out the Temperance River. A lot of really cool places to look, a lot of waterfalls. You get real close to some of these, and it's very scenic the whole way down. As we get closer, it kind of levels out a little bit and then eventually dumps into Lake Superior, which is right by the campsite. Sunday, our itinerary is to wake up around 7. Kids will make their own breakfast at their campsites. We'll take off for Grand Portage State Park, which is a pretty good drive all the way up to the Canadian border. Once we're at Grand Portage State Park, we'll hike in a mile, check out the biggest waterfall in Minnesota, hike back. We'll hop on the bus again, drive down to Magny State Park. We'll do a day hike, which is going to be around 2.5 miles into the state park to the waterfalls and probably like 2.5 out. We may eat lunch there. Kind of depends on what the kids might want to do. If we want to bring our own lunches, we'll eat there. Otherwise, we'll head down and stop in Grand Marais, which is kind of a neat town. We'll have lunch there. We did that last year, and that seemed to work out pretty well. Kids want to bring their own lunch and eat at Grand Marais, too. There's a lot of really nice outdoor areas where they can do that. Once we finish lunch, we'll head down to Cascade State Park, which is just south of Grand Marais. We'll do about a mile hike around, check out the waterfalls at that park. And then we'll head down and arrive back at Temperance State Park. Do the same routine we did the night before. Kids will make their own dinner, relax around the fire, and then get them to bed around 11 o'clock. This is another map of where we'll be going. Here's Temperance River State Park, and we'll be actually traveling the whole way up here to the Canadian border and checking out Magny, Cascade, and back to Temperance, and then also Grand Portage up here will be our first stop. Grand Portage State Park is really neat, very scenic area. This is the largest waterfall. If we get some rain before we go, we'll have more water flowing, but this is kind of a midsummer picture of what it looks like. This is Magny State Park, which is a pretty good hike down along these stairs, and we get real close to some of the waterfalls right here. Devil's Kettle is one of the ones we'll check out. And Cascade, again, is really scenic, got a really cool waterfalls all the way along there. And then on Monday will be our travel day back home. So we wake up about 6, try to get the chance to watch the sunrise in Lake Superior, so we'll get all the kids down there for that. If it's clear, we'll do that. If it's not, we'll let them sleep a little longer. If they have something they want for a quick light breakfast, we'll do that. Load the trailer, try to leave around 7. We usually stop around 9:30 around the Moose Lake area for bathroom and lunch, and then we'll take off again about 10:30. Try to arrive back by 12:30, 1 o'clock at the high school. Kids would not be expected to go to class because they're going to have plenty of gear to kind of get out of the trailer, make sure they have everything, and then they can head home. Kids can drive if they want. If they want to drive and park in their designated lot where they have a parking permit, that's fine. Then they just go get their vehicle, come back, load their stuff up, and they can head home. Or when we get close to the high school on the way home, they can call for a ride and kind of give you an idea when they'll be ready to be picked up. Here is a picture of Lake Superior during one of the sunrises that we hit a couple years ago, which was really spectacular, and kids didn't mind at all getting up early to watch this. It's pretty cool experience. The trip costs $100 per student, and that covers just our expenses for this trip. So we have transportation costs that we have to pay for the bus and the trailer to use. I drive, so we don't have the driver costs associated with this trip. We have some fuel we need to purchase along the way, and then campground fees, firewood, and then some of the supplies that we supply the kids on this trip. So I have stoves and fuel and any other equipment they might need. When we're planning the trip, we'll kind of go through all that, and they can let me know if there's anything they need. Ideally, I'd love to have every kid on the trip be able to supply all their equipment, but I know that's not always possible. So if there's something that they think they need, they can let me know. I sent the equipment list, and hopefully you've had a chance to look that over and see if there's anything that you need. Kids do not need to go out and get hiking boots or anything like that. Just good walking shoes are fine. A lot of kids just wear tennis shoes, which was perfectly fine. So anything they think they know that they need, they can let me know. The sooner the better, and I'll get that to them. Some of the preparation we do in school for this trip includes tent and shelter setup. So we always kind of plan for rain on this trip. So we want to make sure that we can rainproof where they're sleeping and make sure they cover any areas they're going to be cooking over and things like that. We try to do outdoor cooking once a week, so they learn how to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner items. We'll do some practice hiking. We've done some fire starting and talk about fire safety, equipment planning, and also we've done some orienteering. Some of the rules here: we want the kids to make sure that they don't go anywhere alone, stay with a group or a buddy, meet the timelines for our day when we're traveling and checking out all the different parks and things like that. We don't have co-ed tents, so the kids know that. If they want to be in a campground with a group of guys and girls, that's fine as long as they're in their own tents and the tents aren't co-ed. So we'll go through that in great detail, and the kids are really good about that. They have been in the past, so it's not anything I'm worried about. We want to talk about fire safety and not put anything flammable or explosive in the fire. We'll keep the campfires under control and completely extinguish them at night. We'll make sure they're responsible for all their own equipment. Putting their name on them is a good thing in case we find something extra. We generally do find a lot of extra things at the end of these trips, so We can always get them back to them if they have their names on them. We don't allow any tobacco, alcohol, controlled substances. All school rules will be enforced. And then we follow no trace camping guidelines, so we keep everything clean when we leave. We observe the quiet hours of the campground, which are 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and we don't cut any live plants in the campground. Encourage the kids to make good decisions the whole time while on this trip. And if they're worried, they can always check to make sure that they're not making a potentially poor choice. We have a rules form, medical form, and permission form that I'm going to send home, and they need to be signed by both parent and student. Bus rules are always enforced. We have minor rules violations. If we do, we'll limit some of the things that they can do in the campground. We might have an early curfew. We might even move students to the teacher chaperone campground. Never had to do anything like this before, but there's always a lot of enthusiasm on this trip, and usually the biggest concern we have is making sure the kids stay quiet, so we don't bother the other people in the campsite. The major rules violations, if there's ever an issue here, we call the parents and arrange for transportation home as soon as possible. And if that can't be arranged immediately, then we need to call the police, either the county or state police, and report the violation and possibly hand over custody to law enforcement. In all the years I've been doing this trip, I've never had a student who has made or violated a major rule, and that would include drinking, using a controlled substance, or doing something that puts other kids in danger. I've never had that situation, and I certainly don't expect to have it on this trip. So all the kids that go on this trip have to be okayed by our deans. So if they have a history of making poor choices, the deans will not allow them to go on this trip. If they have a history of chemical use, they will not be allowed to go on this trip either. So there's a little vetting that goes on beforehand, but most of the time we have kids that are excited about taking this trip and are very willing to follow the rules that we have in place. The deadline for signing up for this trip is Friday, September 29th. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, and so all the forms will be due as well as the payment. And if the $100 payment is an issue, parents can contact me via email and just let me know if that's an issue. And we have some resources we can tap into at school to at least cover half the trip. So if that's an issue, please let me know, and I'll take care of that. Any questions, contact me. Email is probably the best way. This is my voicemail number. You can call that too and leave me a message. But as we get closer to the date of this trip, I know not all information gets relayed home. So I will do everything I can to send you a reminder and more information through email to let you kind of know where we're at in the planning stages of this trip. So in the event that you have a question at all and there's no limit on the questions, feel free to email me or call me anytime, and I'll get you that information. So thanks a lot for your time and for taking time to watch this, and looking forward to another great trip with a lot of great kids. Thanks a lot.